Rob, if you'd like to begin.
Thank you, Marilyn. And just confirm you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Terrific. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Rob Edwards with the IESO, Independent Electricity System Operator. I'd like to thank you for making the time today. I hope you're doing well in these trying times. It's unprecedented, but we're all doing the best we can. And the amount of folks who have joined today are showing that we're still continuing on with energy efficiency even in these trying times. We're excited to share with you the findings of our engagement with the mid-tier commercial real estate sector in Ontario and your involvement in energy efficiency. Just a couple of things to let you know. The slides will be made available. I'll be sending those out. We're also going to be recording the session, and we're encouraging questions. You'll see at the bottom right the red Q&A bar. Please feel free to type your questions in there, not in the chat feature. And at the end of the session, we'll answer as many questions as we can. Additionally, any questions that we don't get to, we'll summarize and get those out to everyone. So let's take a look at the agenda for today. We have BOMA Toronto joining us. Bala is going to say a few words about their engagement in this sector and what they've found. We've been working together in energy efficiency for a very, very long time and really focusing on mid-tier in the last couple of years together. I'm going to give an update on the Save on Energy programs, the new framework that's coming out. So that's good news there. We'll look at the study, the why, the how, and the what of this mid-tier commercial real estate energy study. We'll also look at the opportunities and solutions that are available to you, both as mid-tier owner-operators, but we're also talking to the audience of trade allies, as we refer you to those who are vendors and distributors of equipment and consultants and energy service providers and contractors who do this energy efficiency work. So we have, those are the two main audiences we're talking to today, and I think you'll find that context will work with you both. We'll talk a little bit about what's next and, of course, that Q&A session. So today's presenters, myself, I work in the private sector at the IESO. Bala Nanam is with the BOMA Toronto. He and I go back a long, long way. I don't know how many years now, well over 10. And he's in the Energy, Environment, and Advocacy group at BOMA Toronto. He heads that up. Jess is with CIT and Econolar. They were our consultant who did the study, and he's going to be talking about the findings of the study. And Stephen Dixon, I'm sure many of you know, is the owner and president of No Energy, and he's been involved in delivering training sessions in the industry for a very, very long time, and we'll hear from him about opportunities that you can pursue for energy efficiency. So let's do a quick update on the programs. Conservation and demand management has been in Ontario for a very, very, very long time. The Save on Energy brand and us getting involved from the Ontario Power Authority at that time and now the IESO goes back to, back in 2009, probably 2008. But these frameworks that I can tell you about, you're probably familiar with, that's 2011, 2014. That's when the Save on Energy brand was launched, province-wise programs. We contracted with the LDCs to deliver those across their consumers. The Conservation First framework was introduced in 2015, and that was really focused on building a culture of conservation and helping consumers save on energy costs. And I like the term that was Conservation First. Then we had a change in government, and in 2019, the interim framework came in, and we discontinued the Conservation First framework, and that's when the IESO was responsible for delivering those programs. And there was an emphasis on business programs with a renewed focus on low-income Indigenous communities as well. So that leads us to this next framework, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So it's important that we give you a little update here on the interim framework timelines. It's ending at the end of December, and then in January, the new framework begins. So if any of you are thinking of submitting applications for the interim framework, you need to submit by December 4th, and I checked my calendar, and that's next Friday. That will allow our technical reviewers time to get you pre-approval by the end of December so that you can do your projects in 21, and your deadline for submitting your post-project is December 31st, 2021. Process and systems upgrade, same idea. You need to get your applications in by December 4th, but you'll have a longer time to get your projects completed. We are no longer accepting applications for Energy Manager and Energy Performance Program, but we are looking on getting those contracted by the end of December. So if you've got applications in, bear with us. Also, any parties that are interested in the Small Business Lighting Program and Home Assistance Program need to also apply by December 31st, 2020. I mentioned the new framework. We're really pleased that the Ontario government continues to see value in conservation and demand management, and there's a continued focus on consumer needs and system needs. We're targeting the approaches for both now more regional and local electricity system needs, and we're going to be looking at introducing competitive mechanisms. So that's going to be an interesting change to this framework. And it's also going to be centrally delivered by the IESO, and it'll be under the Save on Energy grant. There will be opportunities to continue to target those who need these incentives the most. So that's commercial, institutional, and industrial customers. And again, renewed programming for income-eligible consumers and on-reserve First Nation communities. More details will be available in early December, and that will include measures, incentives, etc. So stay tuned for that. So I wanted to tell you about some enhancements that you'll be seeing in the new 2021-2024 CDM program. The Retrofit program is undergoing some changes to provide customers an enhanced list of fixed measures, which we call the prescriptive track. The intention is that it'll improve the application process, reduce administrative burden for applicants. And I think that for the mid-tier commercial real estate market and what we've learned in our engagement, I think this is a good thing. You'll be able to look at your measures and take advantage of the enhanced prescriptive measure list and submit your applications with less need for measurement verification and that administrative burden and that cost and time. So to that end, the custom track previously offered will no longer be available. And it's going to be replaced by that prescriptive track of lighting and really enhanced lighting, non-lighting, and specifically HVAC to continue to help businesses save on your costs and install energy efficient equipment. Again, that complete list will be available in early December. I wanted to also tell you about some enhancements to the Energy Performance Program, but before I do, I wanted to let you know, some of you may not be familiar with it, and I want to just do a quick overview of it. It's a really terrific program. We think it's performance-based, so you're getting incented on your actual performance. It's a holistic approach to energy savings. It doesn't have to include capital, but it can include capital, operational, behavior, and the intention is that you would build a baseline energy model, and the minimum the facility consumption is 1,500,000 kilowatt hours to be eligible, and you can also aggregate up to 5 buildings into that baseline energy model to create that facility. That data is normalized for weather and significant building operations. So now you have your baseline energy model that represents the typical consumption of that facility. Now you go ahead and do your measures, engage your tenants, improve operations, do whatever you're going to do in that business, in capital upgrades, And at the end of the year, you're going to now submit to us a savings report, and you get incented at 4 cents a kilowatt hour on the delta. Okay, what did you save? And the other thing is the existing program, the interim framework, EPP, is a 2-year program. And so you get paid at 4 cents a kilowatt hour your first year. And if you maintain those savings, you get paid another 4 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's essentially 8. Any incremental savings, you also get paid at 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Okay, so that's the energy performance program. These are the enhancements. We're looking at also adding an incentive for peak reduction. The new framework is really going to be looking a lot at reducing peak. We're extending the term to 3 years. And for those of you in the interim framework now who have a contract with 2, we are looking at enabling you to extend that into another year. Stay tuned on that. The other interesting part about this framework is that we have upfront incentive payments. So rather than the $1,500 that we used to pay for the modeling upfront, we're now going to pay you a percentage of your savings, expected savings upfront, and that'll allow you to perhaps implement some capital improvements, energy management systems, whatever you're going to do. Okay. Again, more details in December. Training and support. We've been doing a lot of work in this sector and throughout Ontario under professional, specialized, and foundational tracks. All of these programs are eligible for 50% incentive through Save on Energy. And we have a partnership with Enbridge Gas, and they are assisting us to provide more incentive to the consumer for certified energy manager training, building operator certification, and the dollars to cents programs, which there are, I think, up to 20 or something like that. Stephen can tell us a bit more about those in his portion. Okay, so thanks for that. Hope that was valuable, and stay tuned because there's going to be a lot more information coming out on the new 21-24 programs. The study. First of all, I'd like to thank our advisory committee for their time and their experience and expertise and guidance in helping us with the study. We look at the survey questions and helping us engage with their owner operators, et cetera. So I owe a great debt of gratitude to these individuals who helped us with this study. So just before we get into it, just to reiterate who this market is. What I like to say without being flippant, and please bear with me, but we know who they're not. They're not AAA, they're not A. So they're a Class B, Class C facilities, they're office buildings. They are predominantly somewhere, as low as 10,000 square feet up to 250,000 square feet, but that is, few and far between to get up to that size. But they can be really, some of these Class B buildings can really be quite large. The Class C, as you can imagine, could be medical buildings, heritage, low rise. Okay, the geographic location impacts building class as well. So you may have a Class A building in Windsor, but that may equate to a Class B building in Toronto, for example. So I'm going to talk about the objectives, and then I'd like to just invite Bella Yanam from BOMA Toronto to say a few words, and then we'll get going with the results. Okay? So why did we want to do the study in the first place? The Achievable Potential Study that we did in 2019 identified a very high potential for office in this office sector. Represents 19% of commercial consumption and a 15% electricity savings of potential. And a mid-tier market is a big, big part of that. Historical retrofit data shows that there's been little activity in this sector from the mid-tiers, certainly the Class A. And it's an important sector, not just for us at the IESO and for the mid-tier operators, but also the industry associations. We learned that a great deal as we engaged trade allies who are providing products and services to this sector, and the government. They're doing energy and water reporting and benchmarking. Okay, so what did we hope to learn? What we hoped to learn was how do they view energy efficiency and energy management? Do they track energy spend and usage? What are their drivers, their barriers? What are their decision-making processes? Do they have access to capital? How do we reach and engage them? So that's what is driving us to do the study. And you're going to hear from Jess in a minute about what they did and what they found. And then Stephen will give us an idea of some options to help in this sector. But Bala, if I could ask you to say a few words on behalf of BOMA Toronto, and then we can get going. Thanks.
Good morning, guys. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Good. I always want to make sure. Thank you, Rob, and the IESO for inviting me to talk about BOMA's efforts on the mid-tier space. As I mentioned, my name is Bala Nyanam. I'm with BOMA Toronto, and I look after the energy, environment, and advocacy portfolio for the organization. Perhaps I will start by providing some background on how and where we started and where we are today with IESO investing to understand the mid-tier sector and using this information to mobilize special initiatives and programs and resources. So BOMA Toronto has been involved in the energy conservation for close to 13 years. We got in with the launch of our former BOMA CDM program back in 2007, and it was a period of tremendous learning. We ran it for about 4 years. As I said, it was a period of tremendous learning on how we approach conservation in the commercial real estate. So about 3 years ago, we embarked on our mid-tier initiative with just a hunch that there may be barriers preventing the owners and managers of small to medium buildings from fully participating in conservation programs and undertaking energy efficiency projects to improve performance and, of course, to save operating costs. At that time, there were no data to support our hypothesis, but we were confident that there is something to it. So we launched our mid-tier performance initiative with the hope of understanding this sector and to provide some support. So we really, as Rob mentioned earlier, we really wanted to understand the DNA of the support because it's completely different from how we might want to approach like the AAA type buildings, owners and managers. So through our collaboration with utilities and informal discussions with our members and others from the commercial real estate who own small to medium-sized buildings, we learned that there are two deficiencies. Now, this is at a high level. Again, like I said, there were no data to support. So there are information or awareness and gaps, and there were resource gaps. So we grouped the mid-tier sector into two groups, engaged and unengaged. Now, the engaged are generally BOMA members, and they are also well-informed on the provincial programs and conservation measures, and these buildings also tend to be owned and operated by larger organizations as part of their broader portfolio. And the vast majority of the mid-tier sector, however, falls under the unengaged group. Now, these are fewer buildings owned by smaller organizations, but collectively making up a larger portion of the existing building stock. These are buildings where the building management personnel wear multiple hats and are generally resource-stricken. So with the generosity and support from IESO, we shifted our focus to unengaged group because that's where we believed where the barriers to participation are more prevalent and where greatest opportunities for conservation exist. Now, fast forward a couple of years, and the IESO has taken a keen interest in this sector and has started to investigate further in collaboration with us and other industry stakeholders so that collectively we can support the owners and managers of the sector, that's small to medium buildings, and advance energy efficiency. And it should be noted that from the time when BOMA started our mid-tier journey to now, there has been significant industry engagement on many fronts to advance better performance, mainly through our education program, which Stephen will cover later on. But the important thing is that with collaboration with the IESO, Toronto Hydro, Enbridge, and other industry stakeholders, we actually managed to move the needle on the awareness front, and this is reflected on the survey results that you will see later on. So basically what I'm saying is, yes, we didn't have the information when we the data when we started. We started with the hunch and then got some, excuse me, working with the utilities and IESO, we put forward a program, and in the meantime, there has also been significant engagement with IESO in terms of kind of a part of their broader capacity building exercise. So there are a lot of money and resources invested on the education, but it began to show results. So you'll see that. So thanks again, Rob, and we look forward to working with the IESO and others and serving the needs of this important sector. And thanks again, and stay safe.
Thank you, Ballot.
Great.
I really appreciate your work in that. And I'd like to introduce Jess then to really get into the study and the results. Jess?
Great. Thank you, Rob. So everyone, my name is Jess Burgess. I'm a consultant with CIET and Econolaire and worked with Rob and the advisory committee in preparing this study. My role this morning is to talk very briefly about, what did we do in this study, and then get into a little bit more detail about what is it that we learned from the study itself. So briefly, the what did we do? The study methodology was primarily built around a very detailed three-part survey that we had 76 respondents to that survey who were either owners or property managers of single buildings or portfolios of buildings that included mid-tier commercial real estate. The portfolios represented by those 76 respondents made up 351 buildings in Ontario, and those buildings ranged from about 10,000 to around 250,000 square feet. So that's, as Rob said in the market characterization, that's really the group that we're focused on here with the study. And then that group, those 351 buildings that are represented in the study, make up about 10% of the rentable building area of Class B and C real estate in the province of Ontario. The other piece of the study, we conducted 8 site visits and detailed walkthroughs at facilities that were a part of that sample, including interviews with site staff and folks on the ground in order to understand, what is the actual kind of physical condition of these buildings, and then what's the perspective of site staff on these issues that we're dealing with. So briefly then, I'll preview some of the key themes, and then we'll walk through them over the next 10 minutes or so. But one has to do with awareness of energy efficiency in the mid-tier sector, the types of energy efficiency measures that folks have been implementing, what are the different personnel roles and responsibilities at these facilities, how are projects identified and assessed, and what are the key barriers to implementing energy efficiency projects in mid-tier facilities. Then also we'll talk a little bit about the alignment of corporate and site priorities and resources, and finally the EWRB reporting requirements. So first, on energy efficiency awareness. So Rob mentioned at the beginning when he was talking about the why for this study, that the IESO has known for some time that there's really significant energy savings potential to be achieved in mid-tier real estate facilities. And coming into the study, I think, without talking too much about it, a hypothesis that we had on our side was, well, we expect that the AAAs, the big buildings, facilities, really well-resourced, they're probably pretty aware of energy efficiency, aware of the IESO programs, and closely engaged. But this mid-tier sector, the Class B and C facilities, probably there's not a great awareness of energy efficiency opportunities and of Save on Energy efficiency programs. But as you can see in this first chart, and we saw right away and when we actually started to do the research, that hypothesis was absolutely not valid. 85% of the respondents to the study were aware of Save on Energy efficiency programs and had applied to be a part of those programs in the past 10 years. And if you raise it to just, who is aware of them and not necessarily applied, that goes up to 96%. So clearly, our hypothesis about lack of awareness, that is not the main barrier. So let's move a little deeper here and see what else we learned about where those barriers might lie. So another area that we focused on quite a bit with the study is what are the types of energy efficiency measures that have been implemented in Class B and C facilities over the past 10 years. As we saw earlier and here with this slide, a lot of facilities have taken action when it comes to energy efficiency. Approximately 80% of facilities have done something in this area. When we look at what types of measures have been implemented, we see a lot of activity when it comes to energy efficient lighting and dramatically less in other areas. Going a little bit deeper, we see 70% or so of responding facilities haven't touched their HVAC systems in the last 10 years. 80% haven't done anything when it comes to updating their building controls. And something like 95% haven't recommissioned their facilities or updated their maintenance protocols. So while there has been a significant amount of opportunity, it's really been focused in a large degree around energy efficient lighting, and there's still really significant opportunities to be had in other less trod areas. Now, one thing I want to note, just for folks who are looking at this slide and thinking, it's not syncing up all that well with the slide before. This is a smaller sample of folks that got these questions having to do with those who had received audits. But one thing we see is almost 50% of the respondents here had energy audits of their facilities in the past 10 years. I mean, as somebody who works with energy efficiency in a bunch of provinces and contexts around Canada, that's a pretty high number and I think a really positive sign. Looking over at the chart on the right, the orange bar represents, the share of folks that had implemented projects in a particular area or certain measure types that had appeared in their audit. Yellow, there's not a lot of yellow there, but where it is, it's where someone had, the audit report had not mentioned something, but they'd gone ahead and implemented it anyway. Everything else, the white, the maroon, and I think in most cases the teal there represent, not activity. Might have shown up in the audit report, might not have, but regardless of those things, it wasn't implemented. And what we see there, again, a fair amount of activity when it comes to lighting, but compared to the slide before, there's a broader range of activity. 40% of those who received audit reports did make upgrades to their HVAC systems. 30% made some changes to their controls. So those who received energy audits did implement a broader range of energy efficiency measures than buildings that did not. I think that's a positive sign. It's not a magic bullet, but we're seeing that audits were effective in driving a broader range of energy efficiency measures. So overall, one thing we thought about going in, probably coming into the study, we hypothesized there wouldn't be great awareness of energy efficiency, and we're shown that was wrong. There really is broad-based awareness of energy efficiency and of Save on Energy programs, but a lot of that action where that awareness is translated is to a pretty narrow band of action on energy efficient lighting, though those facilities that had energy audits, we saw that did improve that somewhat. Again, we come back to that question of why. I think so far we're mostly seeing symptoms and not causes. So let's go a little bit deeper and try and understand what are some of the causes of what we're seeing here. So another area that we asked about in the survey had to do with roles and responsibilities in organizations and property portfolios that included mid-tier facilities. One of the first questions, and frankly, again, an area we were surprised, we asked, is there someone in the organization responsible for energy performance and or sustainability? And almost 90% of respondents came back and said, yes, someone in our organization is responsible for energy or sustainability. Frankly, that number was quite a bit higher than we anticipated coming in. Now, when we compare that with the chart on the left, asking about the different types of roles and job descriptions within an organization, I think you'll see a lot of descriptions that you're familiar with, but coming all the way down to the bottom, to an energy or sustainability manager, 20% of respondents indicated that their organization had a dedicated role assigned for energy or sustainability management, compared with 90% of organizations that had given someone responsibility for energy performance. What we're seeing here is, okay, we've recognized that energy performance is important. We've given that responsibility to someone, but who is it assigned to? In 80% of cases, it's been assigned to someone who has at least one other job and another set of responsibilities. And I think this was an important takeaway for us. Another thing that we heard clearly and fairly consistently, especially from folks in a property management type of role, they have many responsibilities and rarely enough time to take care of all of them. And what we heard, frankly, is energy is rarely the top priority. Another issue we tackled had to do with how are energy projects identified and assessed. What stood out to us here, third-party audits and vendors and equipment providers, service providers, are the major sources for identifying projects. And then when we look to the chart on the right, how are projects assessed, the focus there, the great majority, are using return on investment and payback. And, you know, something like 27 to 30% are considering what's the impact of energy efficiency projects on our property value or on our net operating income. Now, our take on that data is, frankly, energy efficiency projects are being assessed in a different way from most other types of property investments. Those impacts on property value, operating income, probably where a lot of other investments are being assessed. But when we talk about energy efficiency, we always talk about return on investment and payback. And so we're evaluating those in kind of the way that we've been told to, but that sets up an uneven playing field for the way that energy projects are assessed compared to other types of investment opportunities. Briefly, because I think this chart really speaks for itself, we asked, where do energy efficiency projects tend to fall down in terms of the project development and getting implemented? And yes, absolutely, there are plenty of hurdles out there where energy efficiency projects can go awry or fail to move forward, but financing, obtaining access to project financing is the clear hurdle, the place where the majority of projects are failing to move forward. That is the key barrier, it looks like, that needs to be addressed potentially before others for at least capital measures to move forward on a broad basis. However, and this is something Stephen is going to talk about in the second half, there are significant other opportunities out there, operational improvements that don't require capital investment or, in most cases, corporate approval to move forward. So even where financing is a critical barrier, there are opportunities often throughout mid-tier facilities to achieve energy performance improvements that can kind of slip by over that hurdle. Okay, and I think the last key finding, something we heard from the phone survey respondents, who again were owners and property managers, was generally pretty clear alignment of goals, responsibility on site, and resources. However, when we went on the ground for those 8 site visits and had detailed conversations with folks working on site, we found a very different story. Often, corporate goals were not clearly aligned with priorities at that site, and resources were frequently named lack of resources or resources placed in areas that did not align with what the site needed, or significant challenge for those staff working on site. Last and briefly here, we did also ask folks about their awareness of the EWRB requirement that came in 2020 for buildings over 50,000 square feet to report their energy and water benchmarking performance. We see here quite a number of respondents were aware and had submitted. A smaller number hadn't, and almost 50% just weren't aware of that requirement. Now, it's probably not as glaring as it looks. I bet many of those 50% are under 50,000 square feet and not required to report at this point, but I'm sure that some of them were. And I think maybe more importantly, and something Stephen will get into a little bit further on, that compliance and actually carrying that through, though it seems onerous, can have some unexpected benefits. All right. Very briefly, I want to wrap up and hand this off to Stephen. But as we talked about, it's a long report. We did a lot of research, dug into a lot of things. What are the top 5 takeaways, both for us who conducted the study and that we think are most important for others, for readers taking a look at it? Those are here, and let me step through them quickly. First, energy efficiency goes far beyond lighting, and when we're looking at the mid-tier sector, the big areas of opportunity are in other places, particularly in this post-COVID or COVID environment around HVAC systems, and then we've got controls and operational activities, retro-commissioning as areas where there's significant untapped potential here. Speaking of operational activities, they typically are low risk, don't need approval from corporate, and involve no capital investment. So where financing or approval is a problem, there's still opportunity to take action on energy. Another one, it's critical to have alignment between goals at the corporate level, priorities on site, and the resource allocation. I know that this is an area where some of the IESO training and support offerings can really help by bringing folks from the site and the corporate level together to address some of these issues and direct resources at new opportunities. And finally, we heard that support is really needed by site staff and property managers in particular. I think this sector and folks on the phone are probably very aware of Save on Energy programs, maybe as well as the training and support. An area that is maybe less utilized is the retrofit service providers, where there are service providers throughout the province ready to provide technical assistance to folks interested in identifying and developing energy savings projects. And something we're going to get into in just a second, there's a very qualified, ready set of trade allies and channel partners here to help. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Stephen Dixon, who's going to hit the last of these 5 things and then take us into some more concrete examples of what we've been talking about here.
That's great, Jess. Thank you very much. Can you just confirm that you can hear me there?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. Great, wonderful. Good morning, everybody. I have a few minutes here to wrap this one up and give you some concrete examples of what can be done. As just said, sort of finishing off the top 5 here, we move to this aspect we are calling the trusted channel. As an example of the trusted channel, not necessarily all of it, we're focused a little bit on BOMA here, but what I'd like to point out is that there are many folks within the channel, vendors and consultants and so on, that can participate here. I've been approached many times as a training professional to assist the channel in actually beefing up their ability to speak to the energy aspects, especially on the vendor side. So there's a lot of opportunities for using training and the incentives that are available from Save on Energy to actually support that to enhance the channel, which is already there. And many of you, as vendors, as consultants, as BOMA, obviously you have relationships with various different customers and clients and buildings that you work with, and that's what we're calling the trusted channel, because those relationships exist. We're not looking for new relationships, I suppose, but it's using those relationships to really bolster up the opportunity or take advantage further of the opportunities that exist. And to that end, what BOMA has done in 2020, and actually the history I've had working with BOMA goes way back, probably closer to 10 years now, in a series of workshops. Many of you out there probably have participated in some of them. This year we put together 7 different workshops, starting off with a very practical workshop called Unlocking Savings. And that little pumping system you see in the picture there in the center is actually an example of literally a hands-on system that we use to demonstrate speed control in these types of systems. Big opportunities in speed control, variable speed drives, great prescriptive opportunity, going to be very easy to do it with a prescriptive incentive coming forward. But how do we know whether we need it? Well, I mean, we actually, even in this virtual world, use that pumping system on camera with an online power meter and demonstrate to people exactly how this stuff works. So we've done this for many, many years through the BOMA series. Then we have workshop on existing building commissioning, where we look at the idea of taking what you have and making it better. Huge opportunities there. In fact, through the Restarting Smart series a little bit earlier this year with BOMA, we also showed that combining existing building commissioning with a new CFR, current facility requirement, working under COVID conditions, we in fact have, you can actually bring a building forward and offset much of the increased energy consumption to meet that new CFR. Existing building commissioning. So we have a workshop built around that, and it was well received. Leveraging people is an example of 2.6% savings there in just the human aspect, right? Working with your tenants or staff within your buildings and actually getting savings out of people. And I think that's a big growing front out there in general, right across the country and across the world. Making the case. I'm going to make a point later on, the fact that energy efficiency could be a really good investment. We have to treat it as an investment rather than just a cost. It's an investment. And if we look at it that way, in fact, it can be very attractive. Monitoring is going to be important. I'm going to demonstrate that in a little while, an example of a mid-tier property. And they really weren't doing the monitoring. Jeff, you referred to the whole idea of the energy and water reporting and benchmarking guideline. But if you do embrace that, then you're going to get data and information that's really going to, surprise you. Ultimately, you'll be able to see the results. And I know that I once had a CFO say to me that the curve, which I'm going to show folks later on this webinar, the QSUM curve, in fact, is an indisputable visual of the results. And that CFO then went on to offer his operating staff more money to do more energy projects. So, again, revealing the results is important. And, Jess, you talked about the alignment. So within this performance series in 2020, we talked about going from the ad hoc to the systematic, right? We have a workshop built around that, right? So really how to organize around efficiency as opposed to, it's something we do from time to time. We align and we organize and make it systematic, make it something that happens regularly every day. Because within the sector, energy is a relatively high component of your costs as well. And then finally, if you've got multiple buildings, how do you deal with all this information on individual buildings? Well, this portfolio approach is to do that. That's what we did in 2020. Looking forward, then, within this sector to 2021, again, BOMA as an example, but not the only component of the channel, the trusted channel. BOMA is looking at doing a series of workshops on benchmarking, building automation systems in a lot more detail, right? Operating HVAC systems in the COVID era, redefining high-performance building, all the impacts, all the things that can ensue when you actually improve the energy performance of a building. Predictive and reliability-centered maintenance, right? So I always say, if you make a system more efficient, you may actually end up making it more reliable, right? And that's going to be a win-win when it comes to a maintenance person. And then eventually linking all of this back to the carbon piece and the growing importance of that and how to make sure that that becomes part of what we do. And it's not onerous. It becomes easy. And all of this, as I said before, these workshops are all dollars to cents workshops, and in the future they will be as well. So there's ways to utilize those incentive programs quite nicely. There's another little piece that BOMA has put in place recently. If you don't want to go to a workshop, if you want to take a few minutes here and there and actually participate in some training, maybe you've got a few operators that would like to do this, right? There is actually an online program from BOMA called E-Energy Training. I would get that wrong. But basically, it's a modular course. You can take it one module at a time. You can only pay for the modules that you need. It's all online and available. And a number of people have gone through. I saw about 100 testimonials. I picked out 3. I got a lot of confidence after completing this course. This is for a building operator. This is great because, these are the heroes of our buildings. And if the building operator has more confidence and you can provide them new information in every area they have, and the course had good modules, most material very very applicable to building operations. So it's a very relevant course, one that's easy for people to actually access. I think that information is power when it comes to building operations, and if we can enhance that, that's always a win-win. Now, moving on here, when you look at the programs that are available, so that was sort of a little dissertation on the trusted channel, but moving on, ultimately what we find is really there's three areas where the Save on Energy programs can help us in terms of retrofit if we're going to invest, right? The Energy Performance Program, maybe we want to do a bunch of things, and it's probably more advantageous to receive that 4 cents a kilowatt hour for the things that we do. That could well exceed what we might get as a prescriptive retrofit incentive. So that EPP program is going to become really important, and then the training and support piece. So I'd just like to highlight sort of some of these things through a few examples as we finish off here. Ultimately, energy improvements aren't the only thing that ensue when we do this. I mean, there are direct energy savings. There's indirect energy savings. We do a lighting retrofit. We reduce cooling load, which reduces the load on our cooling systems and ultimately makes them operate better on hot days, but also reduces the cost. But I like to say that look for a way to improve the comfort, the productivity, the indoor air quality, all those things. You may just find a way to save energy. And certainly by looking at systems from an energy efficiency point of view, we will find reliability aspects as well. And ultimately, there's that alignment piece I just talked about, making sure we align the energy things with the asset renewal. And I think if we do it that way, we end up with a very powerful force, right, which energy can be part of, but not the only piece. And ultimately, the opportunity is huge, right? I mean, these are some facts that I'm very leery about putting out facts like this myself, being a practitioner for 40 years, but I really, truly believe that there is a huge opportunity in many buildings, even today, up to 30% possible with, payback, simple paybacks between 1.5 and 3.5 years. I'll put that in different terms later, but basically a combination of operational and technological measures. We're seeing buildings in your sector today, right, that are going through operational and behavioral changes, simply not investing money, simply doing things better operationally, 10 to 20% savings. That's tremendous amount of savings without investment. That also provides the foundation. Good operations, efficient operations provide the foundations for investing in better technology. You're going to gain more when you do that. Now, I'll have a slide on that one before we finish. Here's an example of an operation or a company right within the middle of your sector, right? Here they had a 48,000 square foot building. They went through a series of actions between 2014 and 2018. A lot of it was driven by asset renewal, but it had a tremendous impact. All the things they did here are pretty basic things when it comes to energy. These were good things to do. They had to renew the systems. What were the results like when we went back and looked? And this was a surprise when you actually start to report this stuff and look at it, it can blow you away what you can find. So here's the electricity improvement. All right, so we picked the baseline, which was back in 2014, 2015 period. And then in the months and the years that ensued up to 2018, 1.3 million kilowatt hours. So if you say that 1.3 million kilowatt hours was saved over, say, 4 years, right? So that's what's that, about 300,000 kilowatt hours a year. You apply that 4 cents a kilowatt hour for the Energy Performance Program, that's $12,000, right? So very quickly we can go from a chart like this, and this is what Rob talked about earlier, in the Energy Performance Program, this is evidence of success. This is the evidence that we need to be able to claim that incentive. And I can guarantee you that's a lot more than 5% in that particular building. And those are the things that they did. So there are tools available, right? RecScreen is one of them. I'll just very quick mention that's how we do this. But it's very easy when we do this very easy to see that we're on the right track. And the same thing on the gas side of it. We can do the same thing and show the same results. And there are programs which you would be able to participate in from the gas point of view. Both there are prescriptive incentive programs, and there are also performance programs available like Run It Right from Enbridge as well, which will pay for these types of things. So there's a parallel set of programs here. There's lots of money available to support the things you're going to do, either on a prescriptive basis with minimal paperwork, as Rob pointed out. That to me was a real eye-opener. I think that's a really great thing. But also on I got a basket of things, I'm going to do them, there we go. That's what I do. And I get paid for the end result. It said, doesn't matter what you do, right? As long as you move it downwards, you're going to get paid for that. So ultimately, how do you get to some of these things? Well, one of the things that we've done a lot of recently is operator training in the form of an energy treasure hunt, which is really a two-part workshop. The first part is let's learn about energy, very basics, and have some conversations on energy. The second part is actually, and we even do this in the virtual world, but basically working with operational folks top to bottom in the organization, everything from the managers all the way down to the frontline operators, which to me are the rock stars, the frontline folks, because they know their systems. We know energy, they know their systems, and we combine that in this treasure hunt where people work together, look for opportunities. It's amazing what comes out of it. There's a key thing in all of this, and this is the alignment piece. It's great to come up with these opportunities, but are we actually going to act upon them? And that's where the organization has to align and actually take action. But I think it was interesting when you looked at, Jess, earlier about the audit, and if we had a treasure hunt, would that increase the take-up of the measures that we know about? We definitely go beyond lighting within these particular things. One example where two building operators looked at their demand profiles for two buildings, and they discovered, well, our buildings should be very similar in terms of how they consume electricity and the profiles on the left. Well, they weren't. And when they started to compare notes with each other, they realized one of the buildings had a significant number of BAS overrides on schedules. When they actually figured out what they could avoid doing there, $20,000 a year, just from a conversation amongst operators in a treasure hunt. I mean, that's amazing. And those operators owned that opportunity. They felt that that was their opportunity. Moving on a little bit from there, we found things like walking around a building and finding variable speed drives, great technology, but two of them hooked up on pumps in parallel and one running unnecessarily. Operator says, hey, wait a second, Steve, you ran that demo. This doesn't make sense in terms of what the demo was. And the operators, well, you know, we can turn one of these pumps off. Did the simple calculation, almost $3,000 a year just for turning something off. You can see how you can get to that 20% through operational savings pretty quickly, I think, when we see numbers like this. Now, I always like to say it's not just about people and it's not just about technology. This is an example drawn from the UK a number of years ago over in Britain. And this is an organization with 4 buildings. Could be one of yours. And in 2 of the buildings, labeled technology as the first 2 bars here, they actually implemented new building automation systems. In one building, they drove consumption up by 4%. Disaster. You put new money into something to save energy, and they get that. That's not what you're after. The second building, 3%. At that point, somebody came along and said, listen, let's just focus on the people. And that third building, they did forget about the BAS, the new technology. They just focused on people, 16%. And I've seen this time and time again. Finally, when they went to their fourth building, they said, let's see what the technology, the building automation, and engaged people can do. Like the engagement I was talking about earlier, those treasure hunts. You put those together, 23% reduction. This is huge. All of this type of engagement is supported through the Save on Energy programs. Think about it. We could do the technology, and we have a retrofit incentive for that prescriptively. We could do energy performance. Maybe we pay for a bundle of measures and operational improvements operators make through the energy performance programs. And how do we get to the point where we know where those opportunities are and we're engaging those operators? That's the training. How do we get to the alignment necessary to act upon this thing? That's where we bring organizations together from top to bottom, right? Not just, at one layer within an organization. We want to bring people from senior management, maybe supervision, right down to building operators. And we do that in a way that it's respectful of everyone's time and role, but at the same time, it builds that conversation. So building that alignment overall. Another example of an organization that's done great things, and they describe this, Greenrock, at their facility in Toronto, they describe this as using the talent within the building. And it was an operational and technological focus. It wasn't just the people, but it was also the application of technologies. Monitoring regular meetings. They achieved BOMA Best Platinum. They tripled the asset value, and there is a very simple relationship between net operating income, as Jess, you mentioned earlier, and asset value. And energy cost reduction can contribute to net operating income increase, which increases asset value. There's a pretty strong case, even if you're going to sell a property within a certain time period, there's a strong case to be made for doing the energy things, right, and getting that net operating income reduction, increase, which translates to increased asset value. Today, they're operating at a 92 Energy Star score, which means that they're better than basically 92% of the buildings out there. That's a benchmarking thing, and some of the workshops that we'll do next year with BOMA, and also the energy and water reporting and benchmarking requirement requires you to use Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which allows you to get that score. So, again, doing it allows you to come up with these things that can provide recognition. They reduce their energy performance, energy intensity quite dramatically. I mean, I think the median across the country is around 28 for this type of building. They're running at 20.9 now, maybe even lower in most up-to-date data. I think this data is about a year old right now. And again, it was a customized process which created alignment, it was involvement, there was investment, and then there was tracking as well. I mean, it's all those things are represented there. And beyond that, right, they actually had an increase in the occupancy of the building, right, so increase in rents, obviously, and then an attitude change around with the operators as well. You've got a better workforce. I mean, and this was what folks said to me, like, the operators are more involved, they're more part of this, they feel important in the whole process. And to me, that's when you got, the rock star operators becoming the center of this, that makes it great. It makes it absolutely great. Lots of awards that were received by this. Now, I want to finish off here. I know I'm a few minutes over time, because I want to recognize the fact that, yes, if we have to invest, yes, there are incentives through the retrofit program. Maybe some of that money could come from the performance program. You choose one track or the other, right? But no matter what you do and what you invest, I talked earlier about a 2 to 3 year simple payback, right? That doesn't sound very good. It means you got to wait for 2.5 years to get your money back. But you know what? In the assets that you invested in, if you waited 10 years, you would get 3 times as much money back in today's dollars than you put in. That's a significant return on your investment. In fact, as an internal rate of return, that is like money in a simple bank account, 47%. But even if we modify that value, make it more conservative considering where you're going to reinvest the money financially within an organization, that's still almost a 24% return. That's absolutely huge, right? I mean, think about the investments that you can, and other things. How many of us can invest in our retirement portfolios with that kind of return? So energy efficiency is a very good investment. And the programs out there allow us then to make that investment where maybe we wouldn't have otherwise had the money to do that. So ultimately, I'm going to come back to the top 5, right? The idea of going beyond lighting, because a lot of the things I talked about there had nothing to do with lighting. Clearly, there's opportunities out there. I demonstrated, I think, quite clearly that through operations, we can glean a lot of savings, right? We are going to need the help of the channel, right? We can't do it alone, right? And BOMA is an example, but not the only element of the channel. The vendors online, the consultants, you're all part of this, right? We have to work together to make this work, right? Save on Energy is going to be there with the support for us, absolutely. And then ultimately, as organizations, we have to move from an ad hoc to a much more aligned and systematic approach to doing this. When we do that, we will see results. And I know, going back to a few of the companies I've monitored with, once you can go back and show those graphs that show those, indisputable visual results, that causes alignment. People start to go, way, this is real. This can really happen. So, Rob, I think I'm going to hand that back to you on that note. So I'll leave you there.
Thank you very much, Stephen. So next for you folks, many of you are on this journey. Some may just be starting. So where to start? The Save on Energy website has a ton of information there, case studies and training sessions that have been recorded, and ways to help you, like videos and tips and tricks on how to do your submission. The other support we've got online you'll find as well, but the dollars to cents training, that is huge that Stephen talked about. Stay tuned for that, because we're going to be working closely with BOMA and others, industry associations, to try to get training out to you. And I really like one of the things that both Jess and Stephen emphasizes is the training that we can do with you folks at the corporate level as well as on site, so that you are aligned. I think that was a pretty big takeaway, and take advantage of the center programs at the same time. Enbridge has programs, NRCan has funding, the government, federal government recently announced some funding available. We have retrofit service providers in market, as I indicated, and they are on one of our vendors, and their role is to help you with your retrofit projects. Certainly, your industry associations are aligned with us and the industry to reduce electricity and greenhouse gas emissions, and the trade allies. We're going to be focusing a lot on trade allies going forward, the vendors, the distributors, because if we can work with you to really understand this market and understand what's available to help the mid-tier commercial real estate sector, then we're aligned that way as well. And we're talking the same language. And when you approach them, we're talking about those top 5, and it resonates, and there's credibility there. Okay. So what's next? I mean, I'm going to be sending an email out with the slides and recording of the session and, of course, the study and also a brief survey. We're interested to hear what you thought about this webinar, what you think about the study, and, you know, maybe the elephant in the room, COVID. You know, how is COVID impacting your engagement and activities in energy efficiency? Is it an opportunity because there are less occupants, or are you on hold because you're going to see what's going to go on with tenants returning? We'd like to understand that better and see how we can help you with that. Okay, so stay tuned for that. So we're right at 11. For those of you who would care to stay with us, I'm going to answer a couple of questions. We have a few questions, and please use that Q&A window at the bottom and submit your questions. So the first question we have is the Energy Performance Program. Does the application need to be submitted by December 4th as well? So we're no longer accepting the EPP applications for the interim framework, but we will be accepting them in January. And it is for a 3-year time frame. Now, having said that, what if you aren't ready and you submit your EPP application 2 years from now? We are looking at allowing that facility to be engaged and involved in that contract, that program for 3 years. So it'll spill into 2025. Okay, so that's what we're looking at now. We can't expect everyone to get in now. Now, obviously, the sooner you get in, the better, right? And you can do your savings and get your incentive. Here's another question. What if your client is in the business of growing their meter consumption for business development, but gain savings in other ways that can be proven through submetering? Has a lot of applicability in telco networks, data centers, et cetera. Absolutely. The idea would be that you do a baseline adjustment, okay? And what we need and we'll work with you on this, but you need to be able to normalize, if you were to do a baseline adjustment for those increases and remove them, show us what you're doing for that, and then show us the way the savings have been accumulated. And frankly, that's the same for COVID, right? I mean, one of the things that we're going to be seeing soon, well, now is happening with ASHRAE recommendations, is purging the fresh air in the building, doing overturns of air in the building, and that's going to increase the motor operations, and so that's going to increase electricity consumption in the facility. But we can't penalize you for that. So we need to look at a way to work together to reward you for your savings and not penalize you for health and safety measures.
Rob, can I jump in on that one?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of resources developing out there around doing those adjustments. They're getting a lot easier, and there's a lot of ways to do it, prescriptive ways that are available through the IPMVP or EVO, Efficiency Evaluation Organization. Another thing about the EPP program, if you simply start today and develop yourself a baseline, that's what you're going to need anyway. I mean, even if you don't apply for the program, you've got it and you can prove your savings. But then at least you give yourself the option of doing it. So I really encourage people to go out there and do that baseline one way or the other. You may just find it very easy at the end of the program once you've got that baseline as well. Right, Rob? That's all you really need is that baseline, correct?
Yes.
In the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Stephen. Yes. Yep. Here's another question, and I'll ask Jess to answer this. Do you know why lighting was the highest percentage of upgrades?
Depends, I guess, in some ways on what you mean. It's very consistent with what we see in other sectors, both in Ontario as well as in work we do elsewhere across Canada. I mean, and in terms of the basic why, I think there's a few aspects here. Lighting is, as long as we're talking about replacing lamps and ballast, it's fairly straightforward. You change it out, set it, forget it, save some energy. When we're talking about design and controls, that's a bit different, but I think for the most part, this activity was probably CFLs or LED lamps and ballasts. The other aspect I think has to do with the channel. The lighting industry, the manufacturers, distribution channel, installers, and contractors they got very organized very quickly 10, 15 years ago, seeing the significant energy efficiency opportunities that CFLs created first, and then particularly around LEDs. They did a lot of promotion. They did a lot of internal training within that industry, and they were out there promoting and delivering those opportunities very actively. I think the HVAC industry does that as well to a degree, maybe not quite as much as on the lighting side. But then once you get into retro-commissioning and operational savings, often there's not as strong, as organized a channel presence there right now to drive those opportunities. And that might be a place where some continued growth within the sector or the kind of support that we're seeing offered here by some of the IESO programs might really come into play.
Thank you, Justin. I'm really glad you brought that part up about the channel. Absolutely. Historically, the lighting channel has really leveraged the programs. And in fact, I think it'd be pretty rare that you'd be approached by a lighting distributor or vendor that wouldn't mention the Save on Energy incentives. So having said that, I think with the new prescriptive measures that are coming out, and there will be a focus on non-lighting and HVAC, I hope it's going to be now easier for both the mid-tier owner-operator to engage, and more importantly, the trade allies who are going to be helping with the project and developing that project and then utilizing the available incentives. So stay tuned on that. Another question, will one be able to maintain its ICI, the Industrial Conservation Initiative, Class A eligibility, even if the facility reduces its energy through the Energy Performance Program and falls below the 1 megawatt threshold? That's a great question, and thanks for that, Julia. The answer to that is yes, and I'll share that with everyone as a result of my follow-up. The regulation allows for that. If energy efficiency and taking part in the Save on Energy program and being energy efficient, you can show that by doing that, you've now fall below the threshold, then there's a way that you'll still be able to be eligible for your Class A. Okay? So I think that's it for questions, and please feel free to send questions to us. To me, I've got a slide here. Let me go to that. There's my email address, or saveenergy@iso.ca. I'm going to be sending out an email in the next little while that's going to have the slides, the recording, the session, et cetera, right? And that survey, as I mentioned. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. We hope you found this valuable. And this is just the start. This is a big focus for the IESO and myself and the industry. There's a lot of potential to help save energy in these facilities, and the IESO Save on Energy intends to invest in this sector and see if together we can make a dent. So thanks again for your time, everyone. Thank you, Jess, Stephen, and Bala, who's now on another session. Have a great end of the week, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks, Rob, and everyone.
Rob. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.